Jamie, listen, man, you're living in the islands. You've escaped your 9 to 5. You're like living on the beach all the time. You were working corporate at one point. You were in the golden handcuffs. You were quite up there, from my understanding, in the managerial upper, senior position. What happened?
The vision became, I want to travel, because it was linked to a deep lie. I never did. And I always wanted to. And I missed out on that. I don't want my kids and my family to miss out on that. Vision is an outcome-based, long-term dream.
All right, Mr. Jamie Gruber, how are you, my friend?
I'm great, man. Good to see you. You look cold.
This is my Yellowstone. This is like my Yellowstone outfit for work today. I want to make sure I have a different costume for all of that, for all the episodes. So yeah, I know you were clearly not wearing a jacket being in the Dominican Republic.
No, I haven't had a hoodie or a jacket or even shoes on for a long, long time. So no jackets for me.
It must be great. I do have a special message for you from a previous guest of ours / mutual friend of ours too. The last episode that I recorded was with Mr. Dennis Marolda. And I had to talk to him during the interview, and he said, "Who's your next guest?" And I said, "It's Jamie Gruber." And he goes, "Do me a favor. You tell Jamie that I love him and give him a big old smooch for me right on that bald head of his." So
that's my guy. That's my guy.
Here's my kiss to Jamie for you, Dennis. There you go. Well received from the man. We just wanted to make sure we shout you out on this. So Jamie, listen, man, you're a fascinating guy. You got a lot. Man, you just got a lot going for you right now, and it's great, man. You're living in the islands. You've escaped your 9 to 5. You're like living on the beach all the time. You're definitely doing Margaritaville the way Jimmy Buffett had intended for all of us. So I want to start off with the Genesis story. You were working corporate at one point. You were in the golden handcuffs. You were quite up there, from my understanding, in the managerial upper, senior position. Tell me about those days. What happened?
Yeah. 21 years I was in corporate, same company, from the age of 21 until the exit at the age of 42. Spoiler alert, I guess, but we've already done that. We already had the spoiler alert. The interesting thing is, as you mentioned, I ascended the organization, right? So I was it was in the insurance claims world. I was a claims adjuster, then a supervisor, then a manager. That moved me around the country a bit, and then I went for the executive position. The executive position came with big salary, big bonus, big equity. That equity always in the future, like you get a little bit of it now, but they always hold a good chunk back for you to vest later. So that's your golden handcuffs, to your point. But I would say mid-20s in reflection. So 4, 5, 6 years into this career, I was having doubts about whether or not it fit me. And I know that because whenever I had a bad day, even mildly, I fantasized about quitting. If you're surrounded by other people who say the same thing, then it just feels like, oh, okay, that's just the norm. And I guess it is. But what's scary about the norm is that people just sort of swallow, gut up, and keep going. They just keep doing the same thing. And I did as well for a lot of years. So much so that the job that I wanted, that executive position with all the money and all the power and authority in the corner office and all of that, man, I did everything to get there, because it was like, that's it. Once I'm there, now I can coast. Now I can just, like, that's the job, right? I'm not line level dealing with people anymore, customers. I mean, I'm overseeing, I'm in strategy mode, a big salary, I've got equity, like that's the destination. And it was when I got the job in 2017 that my entire world fell apart, meaning nothing externally successful, but internally. It was the thing I thought I needed to feel fulfilled. And it was the cold realization that nothing externally is going to fulfill me internally. So that was the beginning of a crash, I would say. So that first year.
Yeah, there's a hole there. There was like a hole there that you saw. Yeah.
Big time. And depression and anxiety and sleepless nights and all of that came after that. And then, I just started to really think about, what do I want and how can I create that, and started taking steps toward it.
So many people probably relate to this, especially the ones listening to this podcast too, who are probably maybe stuck behind their desk. They're looking at this corporate job. You were talking about, all the benefits you get with the executive position. I was going to chime in and say, the Matt McConaughey Wolf of Wall Street lunches for 2 hours, bring me a martini every 15 minutes. It sounds nice in theory.
It does.
But when you're living that existence of, when is this all going to end? When do I actually get off the treadmill? When do I get off the rat race and the roller coaster? For you, you said you were feeling depression and anxiety in that. What's transpiring in your day-to-day when the depression, anxiety, were you doing the same? Did it feel like you were just living the same race? Did it feel like it was just cyclical, get up, go to the gym, come home, repeat, watch TV? Were you what type of habits were you involved in that?
100%. And unfortunately, that is what keeps you frozen, because there's no time, there's no space for you, or there wasn't for me anyway, to really explore and go internal, go in solitude even, and just figure out what the hell's going on with me. But yeah, I doubled and tripled down. My managers, people that reported to me, would joke about it. I'm sure looking back, they're probably like not joking, but eye rolling, like another 3 a.m. Jamie email, right? Like I was just like, okay, something's off. I'm going to force my way through this. That's what I've always done. Yeah. Buck up, roll up the sleeves, and go. So I worked more. I worked harder. I slept less, even less than the sleep I was already sleeping. Like I was convinced that I just have to get myself through this. And the only way to get myself through this is, maybe it's a Gen X thing, a Gen X trait from our baby boomer parents, is just nut up and go, like figure it out. Be a man, that kind of thing. So me being a man was giving myself less space, making myself more stressed, more anxious. And yeah, my daily routine was exactly that, except I added in midnight or middle of the night, checking of email and diving in. And I wanted to show like, no, I'm committed and I'm working hard. So I doubled down on an identity I didn't want, essentially, is what it was. And it just caused even more of a crash once I crashed.
And you had kids at the time, right? You have 2 kids.
One kid when we moved to that job, and then the second kid came in the next year. So, yeah.
And that must have just really created even more pressure, because you were talking about, with men.
That's funny. I was numb.
Really?
I was numb. Yeah. The pressure was the pressure. I felt like, honestly, I think back about that time, logically, oh my God, another kid, another mouth to feed. But it was just, I don't know what the threshold would have been, but like to put it in those terms, it's almost like, I don't know if it's like 8, 12, 30 kids, 3, 4, 5 mortgages. Like, I don't the feeling of being disconnected from who I was created enough of an anxiety or a depression or whatever that was far beyond any seemingly small pressure of like a second kid versus one, or a second car note versus one, or whatever, if that makes sense. So no, I was numb to that in many, many ways. I was numb to the realities of life in some ways, I guess. It was just, it's not working with one, it's not working with two, it's not working in this house, it's not working in that. It wasn't working for me, and nothing else mattered.
What was the aha moment for you?
Boy, there's a couple. When I was 40 years old, I turned 40. I'm 45 now, so this is 5 years ago, October 1st, 2018. I had done some work in advance of that. I'd found some groups and, this whole like, all right, I don't know what I want to do, but maybe it's real estate. So I found like this real estate group, and I went to an event, and I was at that event, which was educational, but also designed to be somewhat transformational. The content, the structure, the theatrics of it, if you want to put it that way, or I'm putting it that way, led you to breakthroughs. So at that event, there was this one particular exercise where we, all these people are kind of bonding and gelling throughout the week. And at the end of it, the guy who facilitated it, he said, okay, everyone is going to go down in this hallway in a hotel. And everyone lined the hallway facing each other. If you can picture this, a long hotel hallway. And then one person at a time would stand at the front of this line, almost like going through the tunnel, high-fiving before a football game, if you can picture that, right?
Yeah.
The person would be at the beginning of it. You would close your eyes, put your palms out. There was somebody behind you kind of like just guiding you so you don't bump into people. And his instruction was, tell yourself in your mind, just repeat, I am, I am, I am. And as you're walking through, all these people will whisper into your ear something as they've gotten to know you that they believe you are, how they would identify you, how they would define you. So I went through this and I heard a few different words that I never, ever associated with myself. One was grit. One was handsome. There was a couple of others, but those two stick out right now as I talk about this 5 years later. Right after that, I went back to Boston because my family was there, and they were flying home, and I was driving from Boston to Michigan. It's about a 15-hour drive. And for 8 hours almost straight, on that drive, a song popped on the radio, or on the radio, like in 1996 here. A song popped on my iPod or iPhone or whatever. Yeah. Secrets by One Republic. I don't know if you know the song. But the song goes, I need another story, something to get off my chest. My life is kind of boring. There's something that I can confess. And it keeps on going. And it essentially says, tell me what you want to hear. Something that'll light those ears. Sick of all the insincere. I'm going to give all my secrets away. And this just kept going and going. And hours, 4 to 5 hours into this 8 hours, I just break. Like bawling, driving on a highway in like Ohio, on my 40th birthday after going through this event, because I never, ever considered myself anything more than something less than whatever I heard in that I am moment. That was huge. It wasn't like in a moment something happened in a flash that had nothing leading up to it. The leading up to it was I recognized I needed help. For some, that's therapy. For me, it was finding community and a level of action. Like the community was found by saying, I'm going to do real estate. That was going to be my out, right? But that was a major, major moment. My second major one came later. We could talk about that. But that was a beginning of the identity that I was shifting into, something I was going to become. That happened that day.
And the power of I am statements has been documented throughout history, from the biblical aspect through self-help books, these I am affirmations. When you heard grit, when you heard handsome, when you heard other things that maybe came to mind in regards to those I am statements, what does it mean, or what did it mean to you to see the power of how people saw you and how you saw yourself?
It completely shifted my perspective on what identity is. I always viewed identity as something that you are now, or something that once you're there, you can claim it. You want to be a real estate investor, but you don't own any real estate. Well, you're not a real estate investor. That's not an identity until you buy that piece of property, right? But what it did for me was say, okay, well, wait a minute. That's not how it works, actually. Identity shifts now and the result lags. So here's an example of that. Great example that everyone can relate to, I'm sure. If you have kids, the moment that your wife or you become pregnant, you're not technically a parent. Look up the definition, right? You don't have a kid yet. Forget the pro-life, pro-choice stuff, but they're not born. They're not, out of the mother's womb. But you are a parent by identity. You're going to do parent shit. You're going to build cribs, paint walls. You're going to think about, financially and this, that, and the other. And oh my God, you're reading books. Like your identity shifts. And then 9 months later, there's the baby. The result lags. So it was a clear indication to me that identity is something you have to shift now. It doesn't mean that you fake it or that you claim something that you're not at all. But you have to own that identity internally in order for you to then claim that identity later. A great example of this is a book called Law of Abundance. I had the author on, Sherry Buffington, Dr. Sherry Buffington, on my podcast. And she said this. She's like, look, the subconscious brain only acts when it owns something. So if you say, for instance, I'm going to have this thing in June, and right now it's January, and then you're not going to do anything with it because you don't own it. What you do own is your current reality. So about 2-3 weeks before said date in June that you were going to have what you said you were going to have, now your subconscious brain might own it and it goes into crisis mode. Think about procrastination, what that does, right? Like, oh crap, now I got to rush. That's the subconscious brain. But if you look at it the other way, if you teach or train or convince your subconscious brain that I owned this other identity, then all actions and all opportunities and everything you see and do starts to align with that version of you. And it actually starts to crash down your current reality because it's like, wait a minute, no, we own
collapse.
that. Yeah, we own that over there. We don't own this right now. So that was the big shift for me. It was identity is something you have to shift now, and then the result lags.
What I imagine for people, especially in the American workforce, right? And in different workforces act different ways in different parts of the world. But I know with the corporate workforce, there's a lot of pride and there's a lot of honor in saying, I'm a director of marketing. I am a director of sales, or I'm a VP at a Fortune 500 company. Those identities, a lot of the time, define us. And we make choices from that, our jobs. And it's really fascinating to me because what it sounds like to me is that you were like, I am a manager at one point. From what I'm hearing you say is like, I am a manager. And then you said, I am no longer this. I am choosing to be something else. And that's an amazing transition. With identity, though, can you speak more into the problem with identifying with your job and what you are seeing people doing that's preventing them from living that life that they desire from themselves? In this case, escaping the 9-to-5 and living the life that they've always dreamed of.
There's a lot of problems with identifying as your job. So, I mean, first and foremost, it's not yours, right? The job is one thing that you possess in the moment, but it's not yours. You don't own it. They can get rid of you at any point. So just from a tactical or pragmatic perspective, that's one problem with identifying with the job. The other is then you're so entrenched and so ingrained in this thing that you say that you are. And then on top of that, if your people that you're hanging out with are those that deify you for that create you as a deity for that. We're like, wow, you are the boss. You are the director. You are the C-suite exec, whatever it might be. Like if you have people around you that are further edifying that version of you, then it's like, wow, that's really, you get more and more entrenched in that. So now try to disconnect yourself. You end up listening to One Republic over and over again, crying in your car on your 40th birthday.
In Ohio. In
Ohio. That's that's nobody's dream. I never had that dream for my 40th birthday. I pictured Vegas, something fun. That is the issue with being entrenched in really, honestly, any identity. Now, look, I've shifted toward, entrepreneur, podcaster, father, all of that. But even being too tied to that identity and not being flexible or open to the possibility that, that might not be my identity forever, I think that's dangerous as well. So it's not just about the job, but especially with the job. As a society, as an American society, we place so much emphasis on those roles, that ascension, that bigger gig. Looking back on it now, I that was me for sure. I don't know why or what that really serves. Like, here's a better way to look at it. Maybe whatever you're doing, what I was doing, I was an insurance claims executive. If you flash forward to your retirement date, and on that day, your kids who are older now have friends over, and they don't know what you did. So you're overhearing a conversation between a friend of your kids and your kid. And they say, what's your dad do? And your kid says, oh, yeah, his life's work was insurance claims. Like, that's the problem with identity. Who wants that? His life's work was sales. His life's work was marketing. Like, I don't know about you, but that feels cringy to me. Like, oh my God, I spent my entire life working on the identity of being somebody else's position that they created and named for me.
That's replaceable.
100%.
You can always be replaced in those jobs too. So imagine even the detriment that comes with, I'm a director of sales. You retire, they fill your position. You're a cog in the wheel.
Buddy of mine at that company still, in his organization, he's got a big organization, but this year alone, it's crazy. It's like 5 people die, different reasons, like sudden heart attack, cancer that just didn't go well. 5 people in his organization. And for him, like, I talked to him not long ago, he's like, we just post it. They're gone. They're dead. Like, oh, sad. Oh, can you believe it?
These aha moments after you've recognized this identity challenges or crisis, where you start recognizing, like, I don't want to be this. I want to be something else. You picked up and you left. You're gone. And you're now, and we'll skip over some of the parts here for the sake of the interview, because there's a lot more I want to just open up with your experience and your knowledge. But now here you are. You have grown a social media account. Congratulations, as of recording of this, 60,000 followers. That's amazing. And that's a big accomplishment, because I remember, like, when we interviewed the first time on the Tribe of Millionaires podcast, like, you were not even close to that.
Oh, I was 8,000 3 months ago.
8,000. So for all of you out there, I just want to share this with you. When I met Jamie is a fantastic host of the Tribe of Millionaires podcast. If you haven't checked it out, you got to listen to it. It's great. But Jamie had like less than 10,000 followers. So that's 5x less, more than 5x less than what he currently has right now. And you're posting pictures on the beach. You're talking about like what to expect when you go to the Dominican Republic, the life there. You make some jokes about, like, your wife's Dominican, I believe. Yeah. And what you take pictures of you and your kids. Here you are now living this life that I could only imagine was like a very, very tiny would-be nice dream to have. I want to ask you, how did you make that happen? What was the first steps to putting that little dream, having it big enough to be an idea, to now moving to the Dominican Republic, and you're living that dream? If somebody wanted to have that exact same dream, leave the 9 to 5, go live in the islands, drinking margaritas and pina coladas. I know you're not doing that every single day, but the fantasy of that, how does someone get started in leaving corporate in a smart, tactical, effective way where you're not burning bridges?
I'm going to use a balance of tactics and more theory, perhaps, to some, although I think it's all tactical, but some might disagree. First thing you said a moment ago, so I call it the 3 C's, right? The first C is essentially defining clarity for yourself. My vision statement in 2018, after I came through my depression, said I got to do something different with my life. It wasn't to become a real estate investor. It wasn't to make a certain amount of passive income. That's all like goals. The vision, the dream, distilling it down, was I want to be able to travel with my family 3+ months anywhere in the world. That's what I wanted. I want to be able to travel with my family 3+ months or anywhere in the world, right? First and foremost, I had a compelling vision that just spoke to me. Like, how cool would it be? And I didn't know then we were going to go to the Dominican or Jamaica or Mexico or Europe, or I thought it was a summer. The kids have to be in school. Like, my view back then was small, like kids in school, sports. So like June, July, August, that's my 3 months. It makes sense. So 3 months, I'm going to say that. And I'll put a plus in there just to dream a little bigger. But that was my thing. 3+ months with my family, travel 3+ months with my family. So clarity is one. Second is, with that clarity, you take action to build confidence in this new identity. So that's that second C. You only know that you are going to become, or you're on the path to becoming what you say you want, or realizing your vision, when you take action toward it. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. The third C is community. So if you're surrounded by a bunch of employees and you're sharing with those employees dreams of not being an employee, chances are they're going to want to talk you out of that. Maybe not because they're jealous or anything like that. Maybe it's just because of fear. They only know you for who you've been, and you're becoming something else. So you've got remember when people in your life, family, friends who have only known you for who you've been and what you've done and what your tendencies are and what your current life is. And you've got a vision, something you're imagining. So you got to find some imagine when friends. Now, for me, I paid for it. I was making a lot of money. I went to GoBundance. You're familiar with them. Joined,
Yep.
and man, I found imagine when guys. Didn't give a shit about who I've been. They looked at my vision and my goals and said, no, this is who we hold you accountable to. Not the guy you've been, the guy you're becoming. So those are the 3 C's. But the big piece in there is action. So I think somebody who's 35, 40, 45 years old, even 30 years old, the big problem they have is it's like, okay, wait a minute. I don't want this corporate job. I'm going to admit it. I don't want it. I want to do something else. I want to be my own boss. I want to start my own company. I want to start a podcast, whatever it is. The fear is, God, if I shoot my shot on what I think I want, which is the real estate investment or whatever, and I'm wrong, well, then I just failed. And now I've told some people, and they're going to see that I failed, and now I'm going to be judged for that. Like, I have to, before I take any action, I've got to figure it out and know exactly what I want to do first. So that's where people say, I just don't know what else I would do if I wasn't doing my job. So the action piece to me is the same advice you would give an 18-year-old who came to you and said, I don't know what I want my future to be. There's maybe this, there's maybe that, maybe this. I think about these things. And you would say, are you kidding? Go all of it. Do all of it. Do one for a year, one for a year, one for a year. Who cares, right? Like, you're 18, you got time, go enjoy. But we don't give ourselves that permission at 30 and 35 and 40. But you have to. You don't know if you like, avocado until you eat avocado. So you got to sample and try stuff and just understand that there's one thing that is absolutely definitively going to happen when you make whatever action step toward something you don't even know if it's the actual thing you want to do. And that's, you're going to pivot. You're going to start at version 1.0 and you're going to end at version 12.0. And that could happen in 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. Who knows? I started out, I'm a multifamily investor. That's what I'm going to go do and be. And I ended up as a podcaster and spokesperson for the Dominican Republic. Like, I didn't, that version of me wasn't where I started, but the iterations and the pivot allowed me to still, I'm always pivoting, allowed me to feel into what is right for me right now. And again, my identity is not fully wrapped in that, so I know it can flex and move in the future. But that's I think the outline. It's the 3 C's, and then you just got to do something. Just do something. Try it.
I want to double click on the vision part, because I know a lot of people struggle with that, because they're like, oh yeah, it's simple. Like, here's what I want for my life. And they come with this grandiose version of what they think their life should be or what they want their life to be. Common mistake with vision creation or planning is that it's too big for them to crystallize and see that it's possible. And when we do that, when we create goals that are way too big, and you know this, when you create goals that are way too big, you don't end up accomplishing any of them. It's just too much, too fast, too soon. For you, when you got into the vision creation part, if we were to drill it down a little bit, you landed on, I wanted to travel 3 months a year with my family. I would imagine there were previous iterations of what your vision was before you landed on your family and the travel.
They didn't speak to a why. And even that statement doesn't speak as much to a why. So a lot of people that I talk to, when I say, what's your vision? They'll say, I want to be financially free. That's my, I'm going to be financially free. It's
I've heard that before. Yep.
Why is it important for you to be financially free? And they'll, because I want to do what I want to do. I don't want anybody to have any say over me. I'm like, okay, cool. That's kind of why don't you want somebody to have say over you? Well, because I've never liked people telling me what to do. It's like, well, why? Right? Like, it's kind of diving deep on it. And at a certain point, somebody has a sort of a deep breath moment, like when I was a kid, and insert trauma that they experienced or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
so
right.
the vision for me of traveling 3+ months with my family was, my dad didn't fly till 60, and I was well out of the house at that point.
Really?
We went nowhere. We had no travel.
Wow.
We did nothing. There was no vacations, no Disney World, nothing like that. And I always have had, just naturally, this desire to go see and explore. So the vision of travel 3+ months, it's great. It looks great on a vision board, like the picture of the beach and somebody stretched out. But the why behind it, when you explore that and you link that why to that vision statement, when you put those together, now you're creating something that actually has teeth. A vision stated because it sounds cool and kind of like, ooh, that would be neat. Like you said, it can be too big. But big, small, either way, I think it's more that many visions people don't do the work. I didn't do the work initially to dive down to the why. My visions were, I want to be financially free. I'm going to be financially free. I'm going to own 1,000 units. That was a vision, right? That's not a vision. That's like a goal that maybe gets you to the vision, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's not what I end up doing. But the vision was not always. The vision became, I want to travel, because it was linked to a deep why. I never did. And I always wanted to. And I missed out on that. And I don't want my kids and my family to miss out on that.
How did you navigate money? Because money is also a big one that comes into vision. It'd be nice for me to say, like, well, I want to be, the top public speaker in the world and speak to tens of millions of people to help break them free from their 9-to-5, right? And I'm just using that as an example. But immediately what happens is, when those dreams are incredibly big, we go back into what I like to call the small self, right? So there's big you and little you, and the little you goes, well, holy shit, how the hell am I going to pay for all of this? Where am I going to get this money from? I could imagine that as you were working through this vision exercise, for everybody listening right now to Jamie's story here, and money comes up, even if you had that nice corporate job, there must have been some sort of money thing. Like, how am I going to pay for all this? Where am I going to move my kids? Where did you navigate that?
So this is great. It's funny. I'm learning about myself by you asking this question, and then having another experience on an interview.
I'm learning about I'm also learning about myself, listening to you learn about yourself too. So we're in the same boat.
No, it's a great question, because it's like, wow, I'm making some assumptions here on definitions. I had Benjamin Hardy, Dr. Benjamin Hardy.
Yeah. I actually have his book here.
Great guy. I had him on. And he was talking about mission. And to me, he was mixing mission with purpose. And he's like, it's the same thing. And I said, man, I actually see a distinction. And I went through the distinction. He's like, I see that. And it's the same thing with vision and goals. I think there's a distinction. So here's how I interpret it, just to give you a sense. I think vision is an outcome-based, long-term dream. For whatever size or degree, it's a dream. What I think a vision should not include is how you're going to do it. I think the vision is like, I want to travel 3 months, or you could even go a little further. And I like to use it as, go to that date in the future, go 5 years from now, pick today. Today is January 17 as we record this. So go to January 17, 2029, like, go there. How old you look, how old your kids look, what kind of car, and then outline your vision coming from there, as opposed to, I'm going to do it one day. This is what I've done. It's 2029 and this is what I've done. But be that as it may, that's a nuance. I think keep the how out of it. It's just like, it's 2029. I'm the healthiest I've been. I've got, whatever's important to you. I'm living on a beach. I'm completely free to do what I want when I want, whatever that vision says, right? Like, that's fine. Then I think what you have to do is take your vision, and this is to your point about big, small, and break that down into kind of two sets of goals. I think there's your lag goals, which are long, like a year. Like, okay, by the end of this year, all right, so my vision is I'm going to live on a beach. And then you might say, okay, to your point, that's the vision. I'm going to stick that out on a wall or in my mind or on my phone, just so I always remember, like, the dream. But now I have to get practical. So let me set some goals. I'm going to set a 1-year goal. So if I want to live on the beach, what do I think is the most practical, reasonable, smart, if you will, that smart model goal that I could set for myself this year that seems like it's aligned with what I want to do? So for me, initially, it was real estate. I want to own 50 units by the end of this year, or whatever. That was my goal, but let's just go with that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. That's your lag goal. That's an outcome-based goal, but it's a goal, shorter term, 1 year. And then you take that and you say, okay, well, let me create this first quarter, lead goals to achieve that lag goal. So while the lag goal is an outcome on the way to achieving the vision, the lead goal are the controllable habits daily that you can do in order to hopefully achieve that goal by the end of the year. So lag goal for the year, buy 50 units. Now, you don't control whether or not you buy 50. You could buy 43. You could buy none. You could buy 200, right? But you really, truly don't have control over that. But this quarter, what are the 2, 3 trackable, controllable, call them habits or goals that I can put in place to increase my chances of acquiring 50 units? So, and even getting more granular, some people are like, okay, I need to have lunch with 10 brokers. And I would say, still not within your control. What is within your control is calling a number of brokers in the hopes that you get 10 meetings. So you track the calls, not the broker meetings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like, I'm going to
totally
call,
makes sense.
50 brokers this quarter. I'm going to list them all out. I'm going to call 2 a day or whatever that equates to, or 1 a day. So that's what I'm going to do this quarter. That's one trackable short-term lead goal. So that to me is how, to your point about, okay, how is the money going to be made? That to me is like distinguishing, hey, dream on your vision, write it down, throw it on the wall, and you'll see yourself putting, I did this by doing this. Like, no, scratch that, because it could be completely different. Whatever it is, it could be, don't put pressure on your vision to be manifested in one way long-term, 5 years from now. But yeah, this year, put the goals down, go after them, and then you'll learn by doing that whether or not it's the right goal, the right category, the right role, the right identity, all of that. But at least you're in action and you're learning and you're pushing toward a specific goal that helps you achieve that vision.
I love all of this because I think when you take goals and you can really look at the controllable and what's not in your control. And I equate it to when I used to work in sales and even doing sales for the agency and the relationship aspect of it. It really is about output. It's really about, hey, what can I control right now? If I send 10 emails a day, over the course of 10 emails a day for the next 30 days, that's 300 emails. And even if you got 10% of those people coming back to you, that's a win, because you're creating that type of momentum. It's the same thing with gratitude texts, right? You've probably heard this from Jesse Itzler, who's a great follow and just a guy that I've interacted very briefly a couple of years ago. And he was just so kind. He was just really just gracious.
Had him on the podcast. Amazing guy.
Jesse's he's a phenomenal interview. And he talks about gratitude texts. He says, I send 3 gratitude texts a day. So over the course of 30 days, now you're sending 90 texts to 90 different people, just telling them how much you're thankful for them, or you're thankful for something that they did for you, or just even thankful for their presence in your life. Just imagine that over the course of a year. Yeah. That's over 1,000 different people that you are talking to individually, uniquely. And imagine what the relationships will blossom from that, or just even the reciprocation, the reciprocity that's coming to you for that. So there is something about those trackable goals. And I love how you just broke it down into what can you control? It's not having lunch with 10 brokers. It's calling 10 brokers. It's trying to set a meeting, and you still can't even control that. But the goal is call 10 brokers that you want to have meetings with. Yep. And I think that's great. Do you implement some of those things with your podcast? I want to talk a little bit about Tribe of Millionaires, because that thing, I don't want to say that thing came out of the woodworks, but like that thing like legit was a good podcast. And now I'm watching you have bigger guests. I'm imagine you have bolder guests like, Benjamin Hardy. I'm watching you just interview these people with amazing network success. Is this type of model that you just shared with us about vision and trackable goals something that you implemented in the podcast to get the Cody Sanchez's, the Jesse Itzlers, the people in that network that you wanted to tap into?
Yes, absolutely. I do my goals every quarter with an accountability group. We have a one sheet that we call it. And those goals, I mean, for me right now, it's funny, if you were to go back and look a few years ago, it was like real estate. And it's switched to, okay, how many videos am I going to put out? Outcome based. What follower count do I want? How many downloads per month do we want to get? And right now, between audio, video, we're like 120,000 downloads a month, which is incredible.
Wow,
right?
That's amazing, man.
Amazing. So yeah, definitely, it was outreach. It's funny, the gratitude thing. I had a guest on named Andrew Bustamante. His brand is called Everyday Spy. Incredible guy. I went to his house to record with him in Jacksonville. It was just. He replied, and you know what, it got him actually, because I had Tom Bilyeu, and I mentioned Tom Bilyeu. Yeah. Hey, I've had him on, and that for Bustamante was enough credibility. But anyway, with him, then I reach out. I did today, and I said, hey man, I have Grant Cardone on Monday. I'm flying up to Miami for that. He's doing stuff with people who talk about geopolitics. Do you want an introduction to his team? And he's like, I'd love that. So now Andrew Bustamante, who's a guy who's very well connected, he is, I don't know, willing at some point, I'm sure, to provide a guest to meet. Dennis Moraldi, you mentioned a moment ago. Dennis and I have swapped dozens of guests. Amazing guy. I just sent him Derek Sivers. He sent me Sean Casey, who's a former Major League All-Star. Like, we swapped dozens of guests. So yes, I have a certain amount of outreach I like to do, connections I like to make with people. And again, it's like the controllable. Like, yeah, of course I'd love something, but I don't reach out asking for anything. I reach out I listen to their podcast. Hey man, great episode with so-and-so. Hey, checking in on you. How's the new mastermind going, or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of outreach and I track that. Those are my goals, because I've just learned that the best guests come from other guests, or the best guests come from other hosts. Yeah. And it's just expanded my network exponentially.
I guess, how much intentionality do you put in those messages? If you're familiar with Dunbar's number, there's a lot of this, like you can only have like I think Dunbar's number is like your brain is only able to handle 150 connections at one time.
Oh, wow.
And it's a really interesting number. I think it's Dunbar's number. But when I learned about this, I started thinking about like, I'm going to build this massive network and have tens of thousands of people to remember every single person's name. And then when I heard this number, maybe it's like psychological. But anyway, I mentioned that because there's got to be, with the level of bandwidth that you have in all your ventures, from the podcasting to GoBundance to, making content, I would almost assume you would have to put so much energy in the intentionality piece. Is there something that you do to prepare yourself to be intentional with your communication when it comes to getting guests, or when it comes to networking with people that you want to kind of rub shoulders with?
Yeah. So I would, this might be overly transactional, but one thing on that part is, as I go, the group of people that I had been not like completely intimate, but like, the circle I ran in changes, right? So you do morph. It's not like, screw those people, I'm better than you now, not even close, but it's more, for instance, I came into a community and it was all about real estate investing. So all the real estate guys and I would gel. But as I get on calls and talk to them and I'm like, oh, that's cool, you got a duplex under contract. I booked, Michael Francis for the podcast, or whatever. It just, over time, it's like, okay, we kind of separate from that, and I start to find people that align more with where I'm going, as do they. So you do sort of like shed, if you will, people along the way. But as far as like so it depends on the individual. So when I get an interview with somebody that I think is a cool guest, interesting guest, there's not a lot of intention. It's like, hey, I appreciate you coming on. It'd be great to interview you, yada, yada, yada. No big deal. I always ask somebody during or after or before, like, what's the biggest thing you're working on right now? And if it's something that I can help with, I try to help with, like establish a connection for them or whatever it might be. But for the guests that I like geek out on, the ones that for me are like, I'm just so, this is awesome. And it's not necessarily the big name people. It's often somebody that I resonate with. Bustamante is an example of that. Like he's growing, but
I was just going to ask you who was the person that you were like geeking out on recently that was on your show?
He's one for sure. Yeah. Like his whole former Steep Up spy thing, like it's insane. Like his whole world is insane. It just fascinates me. Francis is another one. Like I'll actually send them a gift after the episode. And it's not because I want anything from them, but I do want to imprint on them. A little psychological. I don't send a gift like a thank you card or a bottle of wine or something that is going to be consumed and gotten rid of. I don't send a gift that speaks to what I am. Like, here's a Tribe of Millionaires shirt. I go on Etsy. Etsy's my favorite spot. And I find something very custom to send to that person, like a wood engraved plaque of their podcast with their podcast logo on it. I'm going up to Grant Cardone, I mentioned a moment ago. The woman that helped me is his director of operations, his chief operations officer. Her name is Sherry. So Sherry was so great, not only connecting me with Grant, or not Grant, but like connecting me with being able to do this interview, but also, hey, would you like Elena Cardone as well? I can arrange that for you, and gets me over to her team. So I've got both of them, two different people. Fun. I'm in person. I get two done, right? So I looked her up. I'm looking through 10X. She runs the whole 10X thing. So, okay, 10X is a part of it. And she's very proud of that. But then it's like, she's at a Smash Mouth concert. She's at a, who the heck was it? A Creed concert. She's at this concert. She's at a rap concert. She was at like all these concerts and posts these photos. So obviously, Sherry loves music, live music in particular. So I go to Etsy. I had a plaque made, has 10X in the middle. And when you look at her content, when people tag her, they call her the chairwoman. We love the chairwoman. So I made a plaque. It says the chairwoman rocks with a little musical note on it, 10X, and then her name at the bottom. And I'm sending that to her just to say thank you. It's not Grant Cardone, but this lady did so much work as the director of operations for a pretty big company to help me go into their studio to record with her boss. So I do those sorts of things.
I love that, man.
Yeah, again, not because I want something from you, but I just know that it increases my chances that you'll remember me. And that's all I need. Whatever comes of that comes of that.
And I think it's important for everybody to know that even, yes, there's always an end game. Like, it's about reciprocity here. Like, there's always in relationships, you want to give to another person and you want to receive back from them. But what I love about this is that it's strategic, it's intentional. You're doing it without expecting something in return. But you're also going, I know this is going to help me develop a relationship that I'm interested in, which to me, this is like advanced ninja level networking. This is like, this glosses over the corporate, like, let's go get drinks and like talk about the Eagles and the Cowboys losing over the weekend. And like, hopefully we find common ground. Right. And like, that to me is what I think is so powerful. And for all of you out there that are listening right now, this is really important if you're trying to establish relationships, because Jamie has had guests that are just absolutely brilliant. They're really phenomenal, but it's not by accident. This is not by accident. This is not just like he woke up one morning and like he's got followers and he's got people in his network and he's going to go interview Grant Cardone. This journey started, what, 5 years ago for you? 3 years ago? 7?
Very slow.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you were going to interview a guy like Grant Cardone on the podcast?
Did I think it cut up a little bit there? Did I? Yep. Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Did you think? Yeah. Did you ever think 5 years ago you were going to interview a guy like Tom Bilyeu or Grant Cardone or Elena Cardone?
If I'm being honest, yes. I thought that I was going to get to that point. I thought I would get there quicker. But
Okay.
yeah, like specific to the podcast, I definitely allowed myself to say, you know what? I think this is not even. I think I'm pretty good at this, and I enjoy it, and I could see one day doing it. I thought honestly, like 2-3 years. I mean, that's such a long time, but it was a success and failure, a gradual and then steep, right? So right now I'm in a bit of a success kick. I've suddenly booked really cool guests, and we've suddenly gotten good viewership, and I've suddenly grown on social media, years and years on, say, Instagram, to go from 0 to 8,000, and then in the last 3 months, 8 to 60. So like, success and failure are gradual and then steep. So it was a lot of nobody's listening to me for 5 years and playing like I'm a big podcast. Not that I am now, but before we actually got pretty big. So I did think that I would, but yeah, it's still a bit surreal.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's great. I mean, Hormozy talks about that too. Before he blew up, he was like, I was doing 2,000 downloads a month on this podcast. And he was like, okay, well, that's like a keynote a month, which is great.
Yeah.
And then now you saw how big he was once he went all in on his content. Like, guy's huge now. So it is a process. Jamie, we're coming to the end of the interview, man. But first off, I just wanted to share my gratitude with you, and just, this was great, man. I learned a lot from you. Learned a lot about myself, and I know you were learning a lot about yourself too as we were going through this conversation. So before I get into our the last question of the show, I just want to say thank you. You've been so great, man, and we really appreciate your time on the Live Your Truth Now podcast.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, we ask every single guest the same question of what it means to them to live their truth. So, Jamie, what is your definition of living your truth?
Since you said that you were going to ask me this, my mind has probably played through 20 different ways to answer it. I would say to live your truth requires you to stop wishing that you could go back to 20-year-old you and explain what you know now, for 2 reasons. One, you can't. Physically impossible. 2, I don't know about you, but at 20, I don't care if I showed up, nobody could tell me what to do at 20. This idea that this advice would actually land with me at 20 doesn't make any sense. So my truth came when I took a moment and looked forward to 95-year-old me. Because that guy still is out there. He exists in a parallel universe, or at the very least, I know who he is. Like, I know him and I know what he would say to me. So when it comes to big decisions like, do we quit my job? Do I quit my job? Do I move to the Dominican Republic and maybe, I don't know, God knows what could go wrong or good or whatever it might be. I always tune in to 95-year-old me and just ask, like, what would you do? Or what are you going to say on the last day at 95? What would you say if I right now at 45 walked into 95-year-old me, which I hope I make it that far. And I know what he would say. He's like, I'm going to die. Life's over. So like, if you have something where it's lighting you up and exciting you and it's a little scary, like what's the worst that really happens? Go live it. Go do it. So I think my truth is anything that I can align with the future version of me, especially that guy on his last day, what he would say to me that I should do, which if you can tap into that, it's a very powerful way to propel action forward. It might be a bit vague of an answer. I don't have a definition or a word, but I really believe that aligning with future you truly is the most powerful way to identify whatever your specific truth is, whatever you should do on that next big decision.
Yeah, I love that, man. It's made me think about at 95, what would I say to myself, or what would 95-year-olds say to me? And the first thing that comes up for me is live your life so you have a lot of stories to tell when you get as old as me. Yeah, that's really it is. I want to have a lot of stories to tell when I'm 95.
I love
AI
that.
coming in. Well, AI will come in and kind of keep me alive and all that. So anyway, we'll say that for another podcast. Jamie, you've been great and appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming on the show.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to all of you for joining the Live Your Truth Now podcast this week. If you like what you heard, go ahead and give us a follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your audio podcast. You can also watch this episode and all of our other episodes we're releasing on our YouTube channel at liveyourtruth.media. We'll see you next week. Take care.